CIO at TAG. I want to welcome you to our Executive Insights with Kim Trevisan. Kim, thank you so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. Yeah, Kim is going to be talking with us today about skills that are in high demand. Welcome. She sits on our TAG Board of Directors, and we're excited to have Kim here today to talk to us. Just a quick short bio, as you can see. She has a wealth of experience in a variety of different industries, everything from consumer brands to enterprise leadership roles, and now actually leading, working with the CIO of Oldcastle APG, which is North America's leading manufacturer of concrete building and hardscape products. It's headquartered right here in Atlanta, Georgia. And Kim is responsible for all aspects of the company's IT strategy across APG's 27 companies. So well prepared for this role, and we're delighted to have her here. A couple other things. She said she's, as mentioned on here, she's a scuba diver. I don't know if we've had a chance to talk about that, but scuba as well. I've been able to do that on 5 continents, including your native Australia. And I know that Nigel is also an avid scuba diver. So we can chat about that sometime. And you're residing on your horse farm up in Canton, Georgia right now. So I understand your commute and that comment about that. So in the time that I've had a chance to work with Kim, I can tell you that she's results driven and always has an eye on excellence. So we're lucky to have you speak with us today and give us your insights. So thank you, Kim. And I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate it. And thank you for the intro. I'm thrilled to be here. I've been a member of TAG, sitting on the board probably since the latter part of last year. And the reason why I elected to join TAG was primarily because I know TAG to be at least Atlanta's most premier organization that really focuses on connecting technology professionals, growing technology professionals, and really helping to influence policy so that we are in a position to push forward the technology agenda across all of Georgia. So very excited, as I said, to be here. The topic for today is really around skills that are most in demand. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to ask that you keep your cell phones handy. This is a challenging mechanism to ensure engagement, and it's not quite the small, intimate conversations that I would love to have with each of you. So really the intent here is I'm going to share content. There's an opportunity for you to weigh in with some live polling. I'm going to see if I can navigate through the technology without any tech support at my house, and we'll sort of take it from there, okay? But really the intention is for this to be more of an open dialogue, because I do genuinely believe that every interaction is one to teach and learn, and I'm here to learn from each of you as much as you're here to listen to me speak about skills. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully. And let me know when you can see this in slideshow mode. Is that okay? Everyone can see this good?
Yep, that works. Kim, I can share it if you need me to. It's in presentation mode right now. Like it's the back end view.
Yeah, it is. Is better?
It's cutting it off a little bit.
Okay. This is what happens when we have multiple screens. So, so is it visible or no?
It's cutting off the slide.
All right. Let's try this one more time. Would you mind presenting it then?
Not at all. I'm happy to do it.
I appreciate you. There's a lot of clicks. I got a little crazy with animation, you guys. If you can hit it in presentation, thank you. I appreciate you.
There you go.
All right. So as I mentioned, this is probably a timely conversation primarily because as I think through where we are in our organization, we're at mid-year review time. And it really is important for us to think through, what the bottom half of the year is going to look like from a skills standpoint. So if we progress to the next slide, I thought, as most recovering management consultants, I thought it may be appropriate to start with an operating definition. So, what are skills, right? And what I would say to you is that I think there's still a lot of maybe different operating definitions around what is a skill and what is a competency and what is a personal attribute. So for me, quite simply, a skill is something that we do, and a competency is the way that we do it. And so really, just to level set from a skill standpoint, really this is about the understanding the types of things that we do. And frankly, there are tons of different skills that we are looking for from both an employer standpoint, but also from a overarching fulfillment standpoint as well. So we go to the next slide. I did a little bit of research here with regard to LinkedIn Learning, and they have a really great sort of purview into the types of skills that are really needed in the market. And so I thought if we were going to talk about skills that were relevant today, maybe let's take a very quick history lesson that says, okay, where have we really come from? So starting in about 2018, if we click, these were the top 10 skills that were super important to us in 2018. And I would tell you that there's not necessarily a huge surprise here in terms of the types of skills employers were looking for and the types of training courses that people were really jumping into. This was, I wouldn't tell you it was the beginning of cloud computing by any stretch, but it's not at all surprising to me that shows that cloud computing was one of the skills that was in most demand just 2 years ago. I think the other part that's really interesting is when we start looking at the next couple of items. And rather than go through the list in detail, I think we'll pick out the salient points. I know for me personally, coming from Travelport and transitioning into the Oldcastle world, the things that really were important to me were around data and analytics. Of course, it was about the network and stability and stabilization. Of course, it was about user experience and what the design really felt like. And again, I would tell you, of course, it was about cloud computing because being a manufacturing company, we're not necessarily known for being cutting edge when it comes to IT. So how do we create a stable environment and so forth? So as I think about the industry as a whole, cloud computing being at the forefront of that, not at all surprising. But as we shift to 2019 with a click, we could see that we actually did see a couple of other shifts in what was really important in the market. So we started seeing cloud computing being the number one, which is absolutely where we would expect it to be. But we also started to see the inflection of like artificial intelligence becoming very important within the market. Our things from statistical analysis started to move into analytical reasoning. So it wasn't just enough anymore to be able to get the data. We had to actually do something with it and be able to make decisions from it. I think this is really where we see the insertion of people management. And it's funny because when I think management, I don't necessarily think leadership, but really this became really more around people. So as we started to take our technology out of our own computers and put them in other people's computers through the cloud, it became really important for us to be able to manage our talent, manage our people in a different way. You'll see that UX design was continued to be important in 2019. And then we started seeing some interesting things coming up like audio and video production, meaning that the way that we presented content to the market had to shift a little bit based on the demands of where people are and how they learn. And there are better mechanisms than taking a massive document about what was going on in an application. We thought that video and audio was a much better way for us to really communicate. So again, you've got some really great skills that people would have gone out and learnt. And when I'm thinking middleware and integration, it's a little surprising it didn't show up in 2019 as a top skill. That wasn't to suggest that we solved it and everybody has middleware and integration skills. It just means that it really wasn't as important as focusing on some of the other areas. So now as we move into 2020 and we start looking at, we can click here, we can start looking at how some of these skills continue to evolve and continue to shift. We now start seeing that there's a lot of commonality between the skills that we need in 19 versus the skills that we really need in 20. And so a lot of, again, commonality. So if you just look over the last 2 years, we would say that there is definitely continued focus in cloud computing as an important strategic initiative, not just from an IT standpoint, but from a business standpoint. Continued focus on data and analytics, more focused on the analytics rather than just getting the data. And I would tell you that artificial intelligence is a jumping off point from a data and analytics strategy. But what we see here too is a resurgence of something called business analysis, which I cut my teeth as a business analyst way back in the late 90s. So the fact that business analysis is now really important was probably a pretty interesting step as well. And so for me, just understanding, the skills that were in demand in the last 3 years, both from a, and again, LinkedIn did a terrific job of scanning job ads, as well as looking at the types of training courses that folks were really looking at. I think they've done a pretty terrific job of sort of really crystallizing the skills that are important. But to me, if we hit click, so what, right? Like if I'm looking at this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, blockchain, I know nothing, I'm going to jump off this call because I've got to spend this time learning about blockchain, I would tell you time out. No. I mean, really the so what for me is the next slide. So if we go to, what are these shifts in skills over the last 3 years really tell us about the market? This is what it means to me. So if we click again, way too much animation. Sorry, Rebecca. We started out with statistical analysis. And really, the next real focus for us is we said that statistical analysis was enough, but now, we click again, it's really about analytical reasoning. So if we think about the last 3 years, getting the data, doing something with the data, recognizing that we need to be able to make decisions with this data, and all of a sudden we're thinking, well, I can't even get data quality. I don't have a good governance structure. What do I do there? How do I really take that from statistical analysis to making some real business decisions? That is a massive undertaking for anyone who has got a BI strategy or anyone who works in the BI space. If we look at the next one here, we went from things like search engine optimization and marketing really over to what we would consider to be affiliate marketing. So what does this tell us? This tells us that a lot of companies were very internally focused about making sure that people could find them on the web. Only just 2 years ago, which you would argue, wow, this feels like something that's been going on for quite some time. But really the shift is now around affiliate marketing, which to me means we've got a partner. We can't solve everything on our own, that we really have to rely on our strategic partners in order to make meaningful impact in the market. So we're leveraging affiliates. I mean, I'm not suggesting that everyone solve their SEO challenges. I think there's still a demand for that need, for that skill. But really it's about how do we take that and really build upon it. So if we look at the next one, we've got network and security, something that is at the heart of every CIO strategy, my own included. We have a very firm strategy around stabilization, especially in the 220 locations we have in North America, and certainly the 30 to 40 that we have in Europe. So we have an extended challenge there. But really, we've seen network and security evolve into something more. So what did we see it evolving into? Cloud computing. So cloud computing in and of itself, as we've seen, has actually been a trend for the last couple of years. It remains one of the top 1 through 2 types of skills that people really need in order to be successful in today's environment. So again, the evolution of I can focus on my network and making sure it's stable to, oh my gosh, I've got to start getting ready for what does it mean when our company assets no longer reside with on-prem and they're actually pushed out into leveraging SaaS or leveraging platform as a service or any such thing. So if you look at the next one, mobile app development has really now transitioned over to what we'd consider to be UX design. So we started off just thinking, okay, now we can start focusing just on individual mechanisms to engage our end users or to engage our employees. And what we're really saying is that we need to be device agnostic, right? So this trend is telling us that we can start with mobile development, but the reality is that we really need to have a consistent user experience across any platform that we engage with either our customers or with our employees. So again, not suggesting that mobile app development is dead. I think it is at the heart of everything we're trying to do from a UX standpoint. But mobile app development in isolation is not going to solve our problems, right? We're not going to be able to focus just there. We've got to take it broader. And then the last area that, again, that I scratched out a little bit earlier was around business analysis, right? We've got this business analysis is saying that, we're suggesting that skills within 2020 really are focused around this, but I'm more interested about how we're using the business analysis. We're not just getting BAs to come into our organizations or product owners to come in, depending on whether you're agile or not, and just analyzing stuff. Like, what are we really trying to get at? Well, to me, it kind of indicates that we're moving to the next step, which hopefully is robotic process automation, right? So that's what RPA really stands for. So if I think about these shifts in skills just within the last 2 years, I think there's a couple of really key takeaways. The first one is that we do have some common themes over the last few years. So building that foundation of skill around cloud computing, certainly around UX design, certainly around taking data and being able to, do something with it, I think are consistent themes that we're going to see continue, certainly beyond 2020. I would also argue that there are tons of factors that would impact a company's strategy for being able to go to that extra mile. Like, I know me personally, I am years away from RPA. However, I have a definitive need now to be able to lay that foundation and build that roadmap. Because if we do say RPA is on my roadmap, and it is, it's 3 years from now, there's a ton of business analysis I need to do now. So my skill and the demand that I have is around people who can come in, who are curious, who want to understand the business, and then help us identify ways to do better. So that's what these shifts tell me. So if we get to the next slide. In a word, what is this? All of these different skills really tell us about what's happening in our market. And I think it really is transformation. And it's different kinds. So if we click through real quick, just one, there we go. This is a word that has become more prominent probably in the last 5 years, but I would argue has been part of IT for decades. I mean, ever since I was a young thing, starting out in IT many, many years ago, we were transforming something, right? I would tell you that we've accelerated our focus on transformation. And really, transformation is different to change from the perspective of it's dramatic, it's impactful, it's meaningful, right? You could argue that any small scale change, or you bundle a bunch of small changes together, can be transformational. And while this sounds scary and arduous and multiple years in the making, I think there are things that we as leaders in IT can do that can help shepherd this transformation journey for our business, right? For me personally, we're going through an IT transformation. So we mentioned that, we've got a network stabilization piece of work going on. I've got an ERP simplification. We've sat there and we really weren't focused on UX. We were really focused on whatever the old system did, we made the new system do. So we've got our new system, our new ERP doing things it shouldn't be doing, and tons of manual work that isn't very helpful. So we're going through a technology transformation through ingesting some new modern technologies and new techniques to do things. We're also going through an agile transformation, which means not only are we changing the technology, we're also changing the way that we work, because we have to be a little bit more adaptable to the changing market that we're faced with on a regular basis. But while IT is going through this level of transformation, I look at my business partners and think, okay, so there's a business transformation that needs to take place too. Our organization recently globalized. So we've gone from a North American centric model to something that's a lot more global, where now we have to even think through, well, how do we do things like financial reporting? How do we do that in a consistent way, given that we don't have standard operating definitions or even standard ERPs? I have one ERP that serves 220 locations here. I have 5 ERPs that serves 5 companies in Europe. How do we create an integration strategy? So there's business transformation. But to me, the most important part is that intersection point, and a lot of people call it different things. I call it the digital component, like the digital transformation. It's really the convergence of the IT transformation that is literally laying the train tracks as we're rolling the business transformation train. And so to me, it's really the ability of the entire IT organization, not just the CIOs, to really build this converged plan that serves the market in a more efficient and effective manner. So again, I would say, just in summary, we're saying that we're seeing shift in skills in the market, continued emphasis on things like cloud and data and user experience. And really the intent there is this convergence between how does IT best support the business so that we can transform the technology component while we're transforming the business. Okay, I think if we hit next, here's a discussion topic. And this is where I'm going to ask you to get out your cell phones, because I'm going to ask you to take a quick snapshot of a QR code. But the question that I'd like to discuss with you guys is, what foundational hard skills, because some of the skills we just talked about were those hard skills, do you believe are needed for a true digital or technology transformation? So if we hit next really quick, what I'm going to ask you to do is hold up the camera on your phone, hold it up to the QR code. It should open up a Safari window at the top. You can click on it. then you can make your selections. We'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. And then I will take screen sharing back super quick, Rebecca, and show us the results. Okay, has everyone had a chance to weigh in? Seeing some head nods. All right. So these are the responses. What foundational hard skills do you believe are needed for digital and technology transformation? You guys have weighed in, and what we see is project management or agile project management, networking, wireless systems, and enterprise architecture, we would agree. IT service operations seem to be the largest, with most folks sort of picking those responses. So I think at this point, let's have a real dialogue, right? So I'd love to hear from you about, you know, the types of skills that you're seeing, the types of skills that you think there's a bit of a gap in the market. But more importantly, how are you solving some of your transformational challenges and opportunities?
If you have any questions, you can either put them in the chat or have a comment. You can put them in the chat, or you can just go ahead and speak.
Okay.
And this is Nigel. Question for you. What's interesting as I look at this particular list and from your prior discussion is no hard skill listed here as business analysis. And based on what you were saying, might be the #1 skill before we actually dive into technology.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I think business analysis is there. I think it's one of the skills that we'd identified as something that's super important, and it's part of the skills that most people are using. For me, what was super interesting, there seemed to be skills missing, right? So as I look through the list of the top 10, these to me were the missing skills, right? It's the thing that ties all of the pieces together. So while we would agree that the market is really seeing a shift towards, you know, skills around business analysis, to me, in a vacuum, those things aren't going to help us get to transformative change for our organizations. So to me, I mean, again, when I built this, it was really more around, well, what skills are missing? What skills do I have, do I need in order to be successful in a transformation? Because I was very surprised to see that project management was not one of the top 10 skills. And I started to really reflect on that, because I'm like, well, does that mean that we're all experts at project management? Or does that mean that we have such a proliferated view of what project management means that we're not exactly sure, you know, what that could entail for us? So to me, these were the missing skills that would take the skills that we, you know, that LinkedIn have told us are in demand within the market, and would then build a more people-focused strategy for what are the skills that I need to be successful. And that's where the distinction was. So I think that's a great point, Nigel. I think these would be supplemental things that we would need to be successful. So great question. Thank you.
Looks like
one quick follow-up on that, just because you said it.
Yeah.
Where would you lay in here change management in the same concept? You talked about people and the fact technology organization may make a huge change, but at the end of the day, the people are going to use them.
You're 100% right. It was a miss on my part. This is what happens late at night when you're building I guess, or putting way too much animation in a slide. I think you're right. And you know, as I think through our own, as we go through the transformation component ourselves, again, we've got multiple transformations happening at once. And really my job, because I would tell you that as much as I'm an IT leader, I'm a business leader first. And so for me, being able to converge these transformative plans into a single go forward strategy is really the challenge. the piece that is the thread, and I think you're absolutely right in saying it, is the change management piece. And I would argue, and maybe I'm just speaking from my own past experience, companies suck at it. Like, we suck at some of this soft skill stuff. We're not very strong at, you know, and I'm not just saying communications, because communications is one piece of a change management plan. I've seen in pockets where we've done a decent job of managing stakeholders, which to me, sometimes it's about posturing and sometimes about political management. I don't necessarily have that level of politics where I am today, but certainly in past lives, it was a prevalent piece. But really managing stakeholders, understanding the true constraints and the concerns, and more importantly, building remediation plans that minimize that risk. I think that those skills, it's more of an art than a science, and it's difficult to articulate, right? Most companies start with communication. Well, if I tell people about the change, they'll understand and they'll just buy in. I will honestly, it's not worked that way. And we've done it, I would argue in my own world, we've done a terrific job of communicating change. We weren't communicating anything. We would shove things into production and hope the business stumbled upon it. So I would tell you, we've done a bit of a 180, but we have such a long way to go with regard to adoption of the technology we're deploying, the engagement level up front to manage the risk. Through our new ERP transformation that we're in the process of kicking off in September, we've got a whole work stream that's dedicated to change. And we've built an ambassador program where we've taken people from the business who are excited and passionate and can take a message and question the message and really help to push the message down into the organization. But rather than just saying, hey, you're an ambassador and you have this ceremonial title, we're actually providing change management training to these guys. What is influencing? What is having difficult conversations? What is negotiation tactics? What is integrated decision-making look like? Because I think these skills are just not very prevalent in a lot of the ways that we try to adopt change. So I love it. That's a brilliant thought, and genuinely struggling through it ourselves, right? So terrific.
We also have a few comments that people have said. From Michael, he said, it's also interesting to see that security and privacy has dropped off the list, especially since there are so many new privacy regulations being implemented around the world.
Right. It is pretty interesting, but what I would say to you is that it's become the backbone, right? So talk about networking. When I think networking, I've actually converged my cybersecurity and my networking team together. We still have segregation of duties, of course, just from a SOC standpoint. But what I would say to you is that it's become the cost of doing business. It's no longer, hey, we've got to be secure. We've embedded security in everything that we do. And so from that perspective, I think we've seen a shift of it being a standalone set of, let's get the foundational capabilities to an organization, to how do we embed it in everything we do? Because I don't just have one security guy or two security guys, girls, people. I have a whole army of IT people who should be putting security first on their agenda. All of our application development teams understand our security protocols and are engaged. It's part of our change advisory board, etc. And I would say that in addition to that, I've got business solution leaders who are also thinking about security. And yes, there's obviously some very tactical components to that the cyber team is able to do for us. And of course, we partner pretty heavily in this area as well, just because, to me, security for IT is the same as safety in our plants, and our business understands that. So again, I wouldn't say that it's dropped off the list. I would suggest to you that is the cost of doing business, and it's embedded. And we should be thinking about, at least as IT leaders, really about how we make that sort of shift to make it everybody's not problem, but problem to solve, if you will, rather than just, the security guy, this poor lone person who sits in their cubicle looking at Splunk logs, right? So great question, great comment.
AJ also has a few comments here, which are great. AS400 is a technology instead of a skill. And he also will merge into the next one after you talk about this one too. He said BA, or business analytics analysis, is more merged with the project management side now. And
yeah, I think it comes down to we actually split the roles for us personally, but let's touch on the AS400. This my attempt and sort of shout out to anyone who's in a manufacturing world like I am, who still runs an AS400 mainframe. And while we agree it is a technology, it is a dying skill set in the market. We have an absolute demand for people who understand how to run an AS400, despite the fact that in 3 years from now, we won't be on an AS400. God willing, we'll be in the cloud somewhere once our network stabilization work is complete. Well, I agree. This was a shout out to the fact that we have a significant skill shortage in a lot of the legacy technology. Even in previous companies, we had a need for C and C+ and Prolog and really heavy technical dated legacy stuff. But when I think about companies or industries like airlines, and I think about industries like banking, while we've made significant strides in terms of modernizing the technology there, and obviously we're scratching at blockchain and what that means, and truthfully, I'm certainly not an expert in that space. And certainly as we're thinking through curriculums for colleges, we're not teaching kids out of school to do C+ programming. We're not really leveraging some of the technologies that we know are going to be with us for a while, right? Especially, again, travel and banking, probably the two biggest industries that leverage the more legacy-focused technology as the backbone. And again, probably not an AS400, but a mainframe. But I would say that is a skill shortage that we have. I actually said to my 13-year-old, I'm like, hey, I will pay you $350 an hour if you can learn Prolog. And she goes, that sounds boring. And I'm like, it is, but it's $350 an hour. She doesn't understand the value of money. And I thought my 15-year-old would jump all over it. She goes, yeah, no, I just want to build apps and games on my phone. And I'm like, fantastic. So I think we've got a skill shortage, right? And so I think that's part of the reason why I put it here. It's like, I'm going to need people who understand legacy tech. If I'm really going to transform us to the modern tech, you need to know where you're coming from in order to know where you're going, yeah? Now, you had a secondary question, AJ.
He said, yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Rebecca. No, my point is that most of the time, being into the industry, I noticed that most of the BA part is, you put it very rightly, it's automation now, RPA, we call it, robotic process automation.
Yeah.
But if we don't have, the bots created and things like that, BA is mostly coming under the belt of the project management. So they have a side of things to assess what's going on, things like that. So I just wanted to throw the light onto that part.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea, right? Because I would tell you they are radically different skill sets to me. And in our organization, as we're going through the agile transformation, we've actually created a role called solution owners, because while we have a bit of a way to go to define technology services as products, right? So we could argue, is BI my product or is financial reporting my product? I don't know. We're still working through the throes of that, right? And so for me, somebody who can ask questions and really get to the bottom of it and do data mapping and do the heavy crunchy stuff is a little bit different than keeping the team motivated, keeping them focused on timeline, keeping them moving forward with the commitments that we've made, holding application development QA folks accountable when we do our 2-week sprints, all of the executive reporting. So while I think there are opportunities to converge aspects of the role, in my humble opinion, are different skill sets. And I think when we ask folks to wear that many hats, one or both may suffer. However, again, I think it comes down to, how do you define a project, right? If a project is a multi-year, big, long thing, then I would tell you that you're missing the opportunity to bring in some different thinking. If a project to you is a small request for change, or if it's something that's very an incremental modification to something that's existing, I think you can converge them a little bit more. But my humble opinion is that they require a different skill. I think they require a different cultivation. And I think they have a slightly different career path as well when we think about career frameworks and so forth. But I get where you're coming from. And I think that it would totally be driven by the company's maturity with regard to either project management or business analysis. And if you don't have either, then yes, I would probably start with a converged role until you can build momentum to split it out. So that would be my 2 cents on it. I do think they're different skills and they serve different masters. So
that's absolutely right. And because I am seeing the trend happening in the market, and Nigel is also here. I mean, he must have seen the similar thing, that most of the clients are, and most of the clients are actually looking a little bit technology behind the BA side, you know. But yes, of course, you're absolutely right. Is depends upon the case by case scenario.
Yeah, terrific.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
No, of course.
We just got a great question I want to throw out
Sure.
there because it's a new topic. So Kim, you said there were some, the skills you mentioned from 2018 to 2020. Blockchain was #1 for 2020. How do organization leaders decide on what the newest technologies to move forward with instead of just something that's becoming more modern or most modern?
Money. How do you decide? Investment level. Joking aside, I think it's a couple of different factors. I think it's a true acknowledgement of where we are in our own journeys. And so for me, it's an assessment of where my company is in terms of the technology, in terms of the business demand. I'm not a proponent of implementing technology just because it's sexy or fun. For me, it's about, do we have a definitive business need in order to execute? Also, again, maturity of the organization, organizational readiness for change. Things like blockchain, if executed well, is a massive undertaking in terms of changing the railroad tracks that you're riding your train on. And that's, I would say, beyond sort of a transformation. So for me personally, blockchain might have been the #1, but I will be honest with you, it's not even on my radar, because from a strategy standpoint and from what's going to drive my business forward, I've got to put the technology foundations in place. And we've got to bring our business on the journey through their own business transformation. And then we can start talking about other things that are more focused on driving manufacturing. So for me, blockchain, less of a consideration. More so for me, RPA would be, robotic process automation would be more of a focus. Things like 3D printing would be more of a, steel, it would be more of a focus. So I think the way that we decide is actually a joined up conversation. It's not IT does this to the business and says, hey, look at this sexy new stuff. This is about where are we going as an organization? How do we ensure that we've got the technology foundations to get there? That's not to suggest for a moment that we don't have innovation discussions. I think we absolutely do. But if there isn't a fit for purpose need, I think we struggle at getting the credibility and also the investment levels that we need in order to sort of take something new just because it's new. Now, I would argue that that's probably very, very different when technology is the primary product that your company is producing. For me, my primary product is hardscapes and landscaping and building materials. So that's my primary product. So I think it's just about technology leaders being very clear on what the business strategy is and aligning the technology introduction in a manner that is sustainable with the pace of change the business is willing to take on, as well as the fit for purpose needs. So again, I'm thinking 5 years in advance. My business leaders are thinking 3 years. So I need to have that architectural runway to allow them to continue to run, right? And so that's why when I say I'm a business leader first, I have to understand where we're going from a business standpoint. So deciding is really easy. It's a conversation, right? It's a conversation that says, where are we going from a strategy standpoint? This is what's happening in the technology market. How do we marry and converge these two plans? The great news is that we have terrific buy-in from my CEO and our SLT about where we're going and how we're getting there. So that's absolutely the very first step.
Bob, do you want to go ahead and give your comment? I think this is a good one about middle market clients.
Yeah, I've got a fair number of middle market clients, and they're at varying levels of sophistication in terms of where their IT platforms are, and they also have somewhat limited resources. So a lot of times they've had an IT manager in the past that's kind of a, maintenance guy, so and then they bring in somebody that's capable of moving them forward, but there's kind of a process, and I call it strategic thinking. You got to say, oh, this is where we are and this is kind of where we want to be, but we don't have we have limited resources, and we got to think through, we can't just order one of everything off the menu. We've got to think through where the biggest holes are, where the biggest opportunities are. And it's an iterative process with management team. You can't just come in and be Mr. IT guru and tell them exactly, tell them the answer. You've got to work through the answer. So that it's a challenge.
I would agree. I mean, it's definitely an opportunity. We would agree on that. And I do think that, again, the factors for me would be things like organizational readiness. You know, if you're moving from a place where you've had a shared IT guy for a number of years and all they do is reboot the server that sits under Bob's desk or Mary's desk or whomever's desk, right? It's a bit of a hard sell to say, yeah, we're going to move to SD-WAN. And oh, by the way, blockchain's really cool. They're just not there. Like, this is a journey. You know, we're not leading if people aren't following. And so we've got to meet our business customers and constituents where they are, show them the art of the possible without the BS factor, because I know that IT lost a little bit of cred since year 2000, let's be real. So build that cred. But really, it's about being seen as a partner, right? There's no point in me having a conversation in frankness about blockchain when I can't keep my network up in some of my plants because we're in dodgy locations. I can't have a conversation yet about RPA when I don't have standard business processes across my now 260 locations, including Europe. Now I've got that complexity, right? So I think and again, when I say it's a conversation, it's a very honest, reflective conversation with the leadership that says, hey, here's the state of the nation when it comes to technology. 40% of your servers are end of life. You're going to have a problem. There's some risk mitigation we have to do, but I can't spend all year ripping out the old stuff and putting in the new stuff and putting everything else on pause. So I promise you it is a balancing act of really trying to tackle the first, next, and last. And those are conversations that I get to have with my boss actually every week, because we have SLT, so we get updates and we share what's going on. But on a monthly basis, we get to sit down and say, okay, this is the roadmap. I do have a roadmap. We do have a strategy. We check off to see where we're going. Do we need to course correct? Just because it's written on a PowerPoint slide doesn't mean it's gospel. We've got to be able to be adaptable to the needs of the business. But I do agree that you've got to meet them where they are. Does that mean that, you know, we should abandon our plight to move towards blockchain? No, it just means the timing isn't right. So it's not a no, don't do blockchain. This is probably not the right time to introduce the concept when we've got some foundational things. And that's how I've delineated it with my leadership team. We've got to get the foundations right. You want BI, but you don't have data quality. You know, you want to light up the yards, but we don't have proper and stable internet connectivity going into the plan. So let's solve some of those things and then build upon it. So I think your point about it being iterative is absolutely the right point. So thank you, Bob.
Mm-hmm. We actually have an interesting conversation kind of going on. JD says, surprise DevOps is so low. To me, it's a key in any transformation. Do you think it's low due to the change in, due to the small sample here, or because it really hasn't caught on yet? And what's interesting is we actually had a comment back to that from AJ saying, assuming that DevOps is more of a DevOps sec, it indeed requires a transformation. So I think there's kind of a conversation going on there, and we'd love to hear what Kim you have to say to it.
That's my 2 cents.
I like your 2 cents. I think both points are valid, right? Like, I think part of it is it does require a transformation, and it's hard. And I would say that it hasn't caught on yet, because I don't necessarily know that all organizations have the agile mindset. And again, it comes down to maturity, right? Is DevOps in my future? Absolutely, it is. Am I anywhere close to that? Not a shot. I've got basics to put in place. Even things from, you know, we've just established a NOC. Right? So in order for us to have monitoring and visibility into what's going on, I've just built out what our change process looks like from an application development perspective. And oh, by the way, a majority of that type of work is outsourced to a strategic partner. So now we've added that complexity in it too. We can talk about continuous deploy, we can talk about those things, but we don't have the discipline, I would say, or the tooling at this point, or the wherewithal yet to be able to converge the two. So I would say it's a little bit of both. It's not a natural progression if you've come from a traditional shop where you've had 2 distinctly different sort of teams that manage this. I do think that the work that we're doing now around Agile and ITIL is allowing us to take a step in the right direction, but it's a journey. Like, it's not one of those things where you wake up one day and go, hey, we're DevOpsing today, because you're going to have an infrastructure leader, and an application leader who look at you like you're crazy. So this is about how do we, one, shine the light on the fact that there are efficiencies. But again, I don't want to solve a problem I don't have yet. I don't have the problem of efficient code or any of those things. The problem I'm trying to solve right now is having people staring at a piece of glass and being able to know that something bad has happened. I'm still at there. So again, I would say the trajectory is different for different companies. Again, if your primary product is technology, I think you're in a different boat than people whose primary product is not technology. If your primary product is banking or airline tickets or search engine optimization, those things may be a little bit different. So I think it's new. It's a little bit it's a little bit challenging. But if anyone is interested in learning more about how to think about DevOps, someone on this call actually gave me a book called The Phoenix Project. So thank you to Brandon Schultz for providing that. It's a great intro to understanding the different components. So not affiliated with the book, not affiliated with Amazon in any way, shape or form, but I found it super entertaining to talk about the journey that organizations had gone on in order to get to a place of DevOps. And it's hard. It's hard. It's just not the priority for my company just right now.
I think we have time for one or two more, but this actually brings up something kind of interesting. Kim, what are you reading professionally to help you with your career and skills?
So I actually don't have a lot of time, as you can imagine. So I try to balance. I have a reading list that I committed to in January, and I'm not exactly halfway through it. So, and then I add new things in depending on what folks actually are giving me or are suggesting. But I'm probably more a TED Talk person. So I get on the treadmill practically, well, not this week, maybe not last week. Recently, I got on a treadmill and was watching TED Talks while I do it. So I've created a curated list or a playlist of TED Talks that were just impactful and interesting. And I would tell you it predominantly focuses on leadership and change, how you change different circumstances and so forth. I'm happy to share the list with anyone who might be interested. So I think the little snippets actually help me sort of digest that a little bit and start taking some of those lessons and sort of running it through. Now that my commute is only 45 minutes as opposed to an hour and a half, I use the treadmill instead. But in terms of the books, I would say the ones that were probably most impactful this year, I've read Girl Stop Apologizing. That was actually pretty great. Servant Leadership 2.0, which is something that is at the core of everything that I do, and it's the core of everything that my leadership team does. I'm trying to think. Obviously, the Phoenix Project as well. There's a couple of others. There's a list of books that I'm partway through because I kind of pick them up. My family hates it too because I'll pick up a book and unless I get through the whole thing, they're like, Mom, it's like you go into a trance. Like you're gone for like 2 days just reading this book and then you come back out. So just finding the time has been a bit challenging. But I would say that's probably been the most influential. The TED Talks and being able to insert that into my daily routine just because I think it's so interesting to get perspectives that are either not IT, they're not manufacturing, they're not Atlanta based. It's just really interesting, big thoughts. And again, I do coffee hours or coffee breaks with my team twice a week. I split my team up a little bit so that we can have these dialogues as well, because I feel like it's a great way to engage with them. It's a great way for them to get a different way of thinking. And so we've been sort of cultivating this idea that, you know, maybe all the ideas don't have to come from within. They can come from other places too. So anyway, so that would be probably my approach right now, just because I'm a little bit short on time and I'm also a voracious reader. So when I read, I'm gone like for 2 days, just reading until I get through it. So.
That's awesome. I love podcasts and TED Talks too.
Oh my gosh.
Any last questions?
So
Do you have
Kim,
any? Oh, okay, go ahead. Sorry, Jay.
in some of the events earlier I've attended, and this is one of the key discussion outside of the technology and everything, how you are managing, how Oldcastle and how you and the employees are managing in COVID-19 situation.
I think it's a great question. I would tell you that there's a lot of COVID fatigue. I would say we're actually handling the situation fairly well from the perspective of our business continues to remain strong.
Mm-hmm.
I think our people are unbelievably resilient. And so I would say that from a technology standpoint, there was a little bit of craziness going on when we decided that we would become a mobile workforce, for a workforce that, 90% of whom can't be remote because they work in a plant and they produce our products. They focus on quality and they focus on R&D. So I would say that was a little bit crazy. We rolled out MS Teams in 2 days. We had a 3-month rollout plan for that. Did it in 2 days. We had to upgrade our VPN. We had to make sure that we had the right network in place. And we had just moved to a new building. We celebrated on the Friday, brought everybody into the new building on a Friday. And on the Wednesday, we shut down in order to handle COVID.
Oh.
Lots of moving pieces from a technology standpoint. But I would tell you the thing that has really been astounding, and I couldn't be more proud of our organization, is our continued focus on safety, the safety and health of our employees, whether they work in the plant or whether they work in an office environment. We have worked hard to build a flexible workforce plan now. Again, coming from a more traditional industry where it really is butts in seats, I think we've seen a huge shift in the SLT level that says it really is outcome based, right? Because when I was challenged to get back to the office, in some cases, folks were like, well, we've got to get back to work. And I'm like, my boys and girls have been working this entire time. In fact, we continue to deliver on every sprint and we haven't missed a commitment. So despite the fact that you've got families at home who are caring for an aged parent or minding small kids, my IT team continue to deliver on commitments. That demonstrates that we're resilient, right? And so we've kind of battled through a bit more of a traditional culture of, if I don't see it, it's not really happening, to and I would say this is a huge kudos to our CEO who actually says, I'm evolving, Kim. And I'm like, I love this. This is the reason why I'm here, right? Which basically says it really is based on outcome. And how do we get to a place where, I would argue, and I'm probably in the minority here, but work-life balance doesn't exist for certain levels in the organization. But work-life integration is absolutely what we should be striving for, right? The idea that I spend 8 hours at work and 8 hours with my family is incorrect in a lot of ways. I probably do, but I don't spend them in chunks, right? I probably spend 10 hours at work and 10 hours with my family because I really do only sleep 4 hours a night, but that's a different issue, right? But I would say that unbelievable resiliency. I would say that we made a commitment very, very early on that communication was going to be at the heart of everything that we did. So our CEO was putting out messages and videos weekly. We as an SLT met 2 to 3 times a week to talk about responses, how we protect our people and how we get through that. I think now we're in this sort of weird space of in the in-between, right? Where the initial crisis has abated. We've maintained business operations and continued to invest. I mean, clearly we went through one of maybe perhaps the few companies that had an acquisition and are in the process of integrating an acquisition during this crisis. So I would say that it really came down to leadership for us. It came down to the market being accepting of the fact that, we were going to continue to maintain operations, and it really was around safety. But again, I would say the resiliency of our people, just incredible. And really our ability to then help sort of the rest of the community was important as well. So I don't know if that answered your question, AJ, but I would tell you that we continue with this, obviously we're not out of the woods yet, right? We still have a workforce to maintain. We still have customers to satisfy. We still have commitments that we need to deliver. And we're going to continue to do that in a much more engaged and integrated way. Again, my personal commitment to my team was, I might not see you every day because 40% of IT was not in Atlanta anyway for me. But I do want to make more of an effort to be engaged. And I would tell you, just on a personal note, I'm probably more engaged with my team now than I have ever been in the 18 months that I've been in Oldcastle. And I laugh because they're in my house every day. I'm in their house every day. I've met kids, their dogs, their spouse, their air conditioning repairman. We're now, that's that integration that we're talking about, right? We're talking about, I've got my kid and he and she are doing math over here, but I'm on a conference call and I am engaged, but I've sort of have to spin these plates. But I think as employers and as leaders, we have to continue to create a culture where we have to be flexible. We have to be flexible, especially now that school's starting up in my county next week. So we've got to be a bit flexible. We've got to be compassionate and empathetic, that it's more than just what's happening inside this little box. It's everything else that's happening in that individual's lives. And, you know, I've asked my leadership team to make a point of talking to each individual and creating a plan that's really important for them to maintain that flexibility, but we are not at all backing down from the commitments that we've made. And I think that's the other message that says we are all here to add value, to drive forward, to ensure that we are successful individually, but also collectively as a company. So these are the commitments that we've made to each other and to our business constituencies, and we will continue to deliver on those commitments. So, and we've done that. I couldn't be more proud. I mean, truthfully, couldn't be more proud.
Nice journey from system integration to people integration.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Well, thank you, Kim, so much for speaking with us today. I know this has been beneficial to everybody. This event has been recorded, and we will be cleaning it up and putting it out on our virtual channel. Please, everyone, please go to tagonline.org for more upcoming virtual events, as well as our golf tournament on September 14th. FinTech South and Converge are both virtual this fall, so please check all those out. And Kim, thanks again for speaking today and your leadership on our board. We would not be able to do what we do without you. Thanks again, and have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Kim.
Great day.
Thank you so much. Nice meeting you too.
Nice to meet you.
Great presentation. Thanks again.
Thank you.